Jour, maintenant la séance.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the meeting 132 of the Public Accounts Committee.
Standing orders. Members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. Before we begin, I'd like to ask all members and other in-person participants to consult the cards on the table for guidelines to prevent audio feedback incidents. Veuillez garder à l'esprit les mesures préventives.
Please keep in mind the preventative measures to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters.
Black approved earpiece. Keep your earpiece away from all microphones at all times. And when you're not using your earpiece, please place it face down on the sticker on your table, generally to your right, although it could be to your left. That ensures it is an adequate distance away from the microphones. Merci à tous pour votre coopération.
Thank you all for your cooperation.
Comment should be made through the chair. Conformément à l'article 108.3G du règlement,
in accordance with Standing Order 1083G, the committee resumed consideration of Report 1 ArriveCAN referred to the committee on Monday, 12th of February 2024.
From the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, Michael Duhem, Commissioner, thank you for agreeing to appear today. And Mark Flynn, Deputy Commissioner, thank you as well, sir, for agreeing to appear today. You have 5 minutes for an opening remarks. When you're ready, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee members, good afternoon. I'm here before you today following the committee's motion last month to invite the RCMP. I appreciate the work this committee is doing in order to respond to the recommendations of the Auditor General of Canada's report on the government's ArriveCAN application. I understand that this committee and Canadians are looking for answers and accountability around ArriveCAN. The RCMP is investigating and using all available information, including the Auditor General's Performance Audit Report and the Procurement Ombudsman information. The RCMP has multiple investigations underway into these matters. The principle of police independence is fully respected throughout all investigations. Operational independence underpins the rule of law and is necessary for the maintenance of public trust. The RCMP ensures that all investigative actions are appropriate to protect the integrity of the investigation and the rights of the accused individual, as well as take steps to mitigate any future harm that may occur throughout the investigation. This is a delicate balance that the RCMP faces in all of its investigative efforts. With this in mind, I would now like to share more information with the committee on the area within the RCMP that has the expertise and experience on leading these types of investigations. Le service de la police fédérale constitue une
This is an essential responsibility of the RCMP, is provided at each province and territory as well as abroad. As part of the Federal Police's mandate, the investigatory keep, which falls under the RCMP, conducts sensitive investigations which represent a threat to the economic, social safety of Canada's institutions. International investigations concerning serious allegations of corruption and financial crime under the Criminal Code and other federal statutes within the government or in its institutions.
Any criminal investigation must be protected. While subjects of investigations are sometimes known publicly, additional associates to the alleged offense are often unknown. Knowledge of the suspect, charges, or investigative strategy and techniques can lead to potential destruction of evidence, intimidation of witnesses, or prejudice to an innocent person. Any disclosure of the aforementioned component has the potential to compromise an ongoing investigation. The RCMP cannot comment on the nature or the source of the information it receives relating to ongoing investigation. In this case of ArriveCAN, the RCMP can confirm that it is investigating all associated matters to determine if any criminal offense has taken place. As a means to ensuring police independence that is free from any real or perceived political influence, the RCMP is operationally independent. Police independence is an important principle in a free and democratic society that ensures that the government cannot direct or influence the actions of law enforcement, and that law enforcement decisions may remain based on the information and evidence available to police. The independence of the law enforcement is fully respected throughout all investigations. In sensitive and complex investigations, such as the ones we are investigating, the timeline of these investigations will vary depending on a myriad of factors, including matters of privilege, the number of other ongoing investigations, and available resources. As a result, the duration of these investigations can vary. Today, I'm committed to provide you as much information as possible on the investigations. Mark and I will answer your questions to the best of our ability, all the while protecting the integrity of this or any other ongoing investigation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We're going to begin our first round. Each of the first 4 members will have 6 minutes each. Mr. Brock, you're leading us off. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for your attendance. Commissioner, you referenced in your opening statement multiple investigations into these matters. Is this in reference to the Arrive Can issue?
There are multiple, correct, Mr. Chair, there are multiple investigations going on.
How many in total, officer?
I'd have to refer to Mr. Flynn and see if we'd have an exact number, but numerous.
Can I get an exact number?
So with respect to this type of activity, there's a broad number of investigations specific to Arrive Can. There is one investigation specific to Arrive Can.
So one general investigation and offshoots from that investigation?
Not offshoots, but if you look at the Arrive Can as well as other similar types of situations, there are many is the category I would put in. I won't give us an exact number.
Many. So more than 6?
I'll say yes.
Yes,
So that would be as precise as I can get to.
And is this in reference to contractors and subcontractors, or does it involve federal bureaucrats, and or does it involve government officials?
Specifically, I'm speaking to procurement irregularity investigations.
Okay. Again, the question put to you, is this exclusive to contractors and subcontractors, or does it involve government officials?
It involves the entirety of what needs to be looked at with respect to procurement contracts.
And I take from that the entirety could include contractors, subcontractors, the federal bureaucracy that dealt with those contractors, as well as the deputy ministers overseeing that department, and ultimately the ministers of the Crown who have ultimate responsibility. It's a catchment of individuals that potentially you're going to be looking at. Is that correct, sir?
I will not speak to any information with respect to the targets or subjects of the investigation. I will simply speak to the substance of it to give you as much information as I can today to be helpful.
Thank you, sir. I'm moving on to GC Strategies. On the eve of his call to the bar in the House of Commons, Christian Firth, one of the 2 owners of GC Strategies, by his definition, GC standing for Government of Canada, had his home raided. I understand this was a offshoot or a part of the RCMP detachment. It was the Sensitive and International Investigation Unit that was responsible for the execution of the warrant. How many officers were involved?
We never speak to the number of officers involved in our policing operations. We did, in that instance, take the unusual step of confirming that we did execute a search warrant.
Who was home at the time?
I do not have that information.
Can you provide that to us?
I would not provide that. Again, that would speak to details of the operation and personal information.
And what was searched?
I will not be speaking to that either. That's an active investigation. That's
Christian Firth confirmed what was searched. He actually reviewed the 6-page search warrant. And just for the education of the Canadian public who are watching this, anyone has the ability to apply for a release of that search warrant, and information to obtain. In essence, someone can apply to a court, get a court order, and actually review the content of that 6-page search warrant. You agree with me, sir?
If the warrant is not sealed, that is correct.
Right. Was this warrant sealed?
I do not have that information.
Can you provide that to us?
We can determine that, yes.
Okay. So Christian Firth confirmed to the House of Commons that basically his electronic devices were seized. And I know you can't confirm nor deny that, but he supplied that as information. Has that furthered your investigation into criminal activity involving Christian Firth?
The RCMP is exploring and reviewing all of the information as we do in any investigation that comes into our possession with respect to investigative materials.
And the potential criminal charges as outlined in that search warrant included what?
Again, I don't have that specific information.
Are you free to give us that information?
once I determine whether or not the warrant was sealed and the contents
Okay.
of it.
Well,
we
I'll
will
cut,
provide that
I'll
as
cut to
part
the
of that.
chase. According to Christian Firth, who skimmed the 6-page report, it was in relation to fraudulent billing and forgery with respect to resumes. Would that seem accurate?
Again, I won't be confirming any information contained in the document that I've not
Okay.
read.
Mr. Firth had a partner. His name was Darren Anthony. Was his home raided as well?
I will not be commenting on that. Again, that would be confirming elements of an investigation that, to my knowledge,
Would he
has-
be part of the broader search of individuals who are part and parcel of your investigation with respect to Arrive Can?
Again, I will not be confirming targets of investigation that are not already publicly known.
Has Mr. Firth been cooperative with the police?
Again, we're speaking to details of the investigation that I will.
Has
not
Mr.
be-
Firth been arrested?
Mr. Chair, I'd love to keep answering these questions, but again, I hate to repeat myself. And
Has Mr. Firth been charged with a criminal offense, yes or no?
I'm not speaking to any of the details of our current investigation, but if a charge had been laid, that would have been made public.
Okay. The allegations that founded,
Afraid. I'm coming back to you. Actually, I'll come back to you because I know you're next on the list. So, Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Chair, and thank you for the witnesses for waiting until we finished our votes today. So, Commissioner Duhem, you originally declined the committee's invitation to appear, and I'd like to read part of your letter in response to the clerk. As you may be aware, a similar motion concerning ArriveCan was put forward by the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates in October 2023, which called for the appearance of an RCMP official in respect of reports that the RCMP is investigating allegations of misconduct by 3 companies involved in the development of the ArriveCan app. The RCMP responded in writing to this request, noting that the RCMP was not investigating ArriveCan and was investigating allegations brought to our attention by Bottler AI. However, since that letter on October 2023, the RCMP has opened an investigation into ArriveCan. Respectfully, I am of the view that having an RCMP official appear on this matter would not serve the committee well, since we would not be able to comment in order to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation. That said, the RCMP is committed to transparency, accountability, and integrity and remains open to the possibility of appearing at the conclusion of the investigation should that be necessary. Yours sincerely, Mike Duhem. Can you please tell us what changed your mind to choose to appear before the committee today?
Well, initially, Mr. Chair, when it was presented, it was to discuss about the investigation itself. And the reason why we prepared this letter to the clerk was to explain that we are not at liberty to explain or to talk about any of the details of the investigation. And I wanted the committee to be apprised of that and then to make an informed decision, because the last thing I want to do is waste your precious time on something that we can't really answer to. So that was the purpose of the letter. And there's another letter that follow up on the 29th that we would be more than happy to come with the understanding that, again, that we cannot talk about the specifics of the investigation.
Well, it's good that you laid the facts out for us. How do you or the RCMP, generally speaking, decide on what is when it is appropriate to speak publicly about an ongoing investigation?
Well, as Mark alluded to earlier, when charges are laid, it is before the judicial process system, and it is disclosed to the general public. And we have a responsibility when we are investigating to make sure that we protect not only the people that we are investigating, but witnesses and whatnot for fear of intimidation, and as well as making sure that we protect the investigation itself.
So how is it determined what information or evidence is able to be shared publicly?
I'll let Mr. Flynn piggyback on what I want to say, but anything that would be relevant to evidence to an investigation would not be discussed. Mark?
Yeah, so there are times when we do speak about ongoing investigations when there is significant public interest and public safety interest is usually the deciding factor in a decision to reveal publicly what we are doing with respect to a certain matter.
How does the RCMP balance the need to preserve integrity of investigations with the public's right to information?
Well, I appreciate, Mr. Chair. It's a delicate balance that we do in these high-profile files, and again, the responsibility that we have as members of the RCMP is to protect the integrity of the investigation.
Do you feel pressure from certain members of Parliament to appear before this committee or others?
Not at all, and that's why my subsequent letter came in that if you wish to still talk to us in regards to the first letter I sent with regards to investigation, we'd be more than willing to appear.
Did the RCMP feel politically pressured to open an investigation into ArriveCan?
No, we do not feel, as with any other files, there's never any political interference or pressure to open a file. In this particular case, it was brought to our attention. Our sensitive international investigation began the investigation, and then subsequently we received a letter from the leader of the opposition to investigate it further on ArriveCan, which we are doing right now.
How does public pressure weigh into the RCMP's decision on whether to investigate something?
Public pressure, we've faced public pressure in the past with the positions we take on certain investigation. And again, we look at an investigation where there's merit to it. And again, once we begin investigations, maintaining the integrity of the investigation.
Does the media play any role in your decision on whether to investigate something?
Not, Mr. Chair, not with regards to if we investigate or not, but they like to know what's going on.
When we have MPs from one political party in particular that are tweeting things such as demanding the RCMP open a particular investigation or lay charges, or that the RCMP is under the control of Justin Trudeau, how do you handle that?
So all of our investigative decisions are made completely independent of all political figures, whether they be members of parliament, ministers, prime ministers, etc. We guard our independence quite strongly, and we are not at all weak in resisting any external forces on what we investigate and don't.
Thank you. That is your time, Ms. Yip. Suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair Desgagnés.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, 6 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thanks to the witnesses for being here today and for having agreed to our invitation. I think that the information that you can give us today, all the information you can give us today, will be very helpful. Let's take a step back and put things in context, if we may. Now, evidently, the RCMP started an investigation in October 2023. Moreover, the Auditor General learned this at the same time as everyone else, whilst she was carrying out her own audit on ArriveCan first. Why didn't you advise the Auditor General and reach out to her right from the outset to avoid duplication and to use the evidence that she was collecting in her audit on ArriveCan? Mr. Chairperson, I think it's key that we face the facts, and that is that the Auditor General has to work with her own parameters, and the RCMP works under different parameters, and information sharing doesn't occur as easily as you would intimate. Well, it should, shouldn't it? You are conducting an investigation. There may be criminal charges laid. In the case of the Auditor General, if she detects such wrongdoing, she would hand that over to you. Now, when it comes to forged CVs and fraudulent billing, perhaps she might put her finger on that misconduct and then hand the file over to you for investigation purposes response. Ideally, that would be the way things work, but in reality, police investigations are very different. We have to obtain information from various levels of governments. It's a different process for the Auditor General, a different process to the police's process. Did you reach out to the Auditor General? I didn't communicate directly with her, but we did have discussions at some point. Well, I imagine she handed the entire file over to you, including all the evidence she'd collected on ArriveCan. Response. She said that she was prepared to cooperate with us, and as I stated earlier, there's a legal process by way of which the police collect its evidence under a police investigation. I think Mr. Flynn would like to chime in.
Precision to be added. The RCMP confirmed in October that we were conducting investigations with respect to other matters, and we clarified that they were not in relation to ArriveCan. It is not until after the Auditor General tabled the report that we've confirmed publicly that we were investigating that matter. And with respect to the
Merci.
Yes, I understand. Thanks very much, Mr. Flynn. We're aware that it was the Butler AI complaints that you were initially investigating, and then when the incident grew in scope and got more and more attention, and we realized that this had to do with more than one business or company, well, the investigation was broadened. Now, the question that a lot of folks are asking, both Quebecers and those elsewhere in Canada, is the ArriveCan investigation and the additional investigations that you first alluded to, will those investigations be made public at some point? I.e., will the outcomes and findings be made public, or only the potential criminal charges? Response. Well, when the investigation concludes, given the attention it's garnered, we do intend to make public announcements about what has been determined. Now, were there to be charges laid, the court documents are, of course, able to be disclosed, and those that are not able to be disclosed can be obtained under an Access to Information ATIP request. Now, our plan is to proceed in that manner at the conclusion of the investigation. Do you have a sense of when that might occur? I'm talking about the overall ArriveCan investigation, and I imagine that the other parallel investigations, and you can't name names, but I'm sure there'll be different timelines for them. But what about the overall ArriveCan investigation? A timeline, please. Response. It's difficult to put to give you a specific timeline. For example, cell phones 20 years ago phones 20 years ago used to just be telephones. Now they're smartphones, and it's a world of difference. So it's not just in interviewing one person. Sometimes when we interview one person, we end up having to investigate a further 10 people. So it's difficult to set a timeline. Well, what do you have a ballpark sense? End of the year, 3 or 4 years? Well, it depends on the complexity of the investigation, and that can vary from day to day. I can assure you that we have the adequate resources to address the complaints that have been made. Question, so you have no real sense whether it's towards the end of the year or early in 2025? Listen, I'd be speculating, as I said earlier. Things can change overnight in an investigation. Well, sometimes speculation is better than nothing, says the member, but I imagine I've run out of time almost. No, not enough time for another question. Well, I'll tack on that additional time to your next round.
Pardon me, Mr. Green. Nice to see you again. You have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I had so much fun the last time I was here. I thought I'd come back. I would like to open my round, however, with a notice of motion that, as per the usual practice of the House of Commons Standing Committee, the Standing Committee on Public Accounts shall not meet during the Parliament's summer recess unless the requirements of a 106.4 of the standing orders are met. So that's a notice of motion that I have now put on the table, and I will continue with my round. Thank you very much. Commissioner, the Auditor General found, finding 1.50 of her report, that multiple amendments were made to those non-competitive professional service contracts, and approximately half of the contract amendments extended the contract beyond the original period, which prevented or delayed opportunities for other contractors to compete for work. These amendments also resulted in additional cost. Additionally, we know that GC Strategies had falsified resumes, provided inflated task or authorizations to the government, and it's possible that there have been a duplication of the task or authorizations to claim for higher billing. Is that part being investigated?
Again, I'll refer to what Mark mentioned earlier, that I'm not going to comment on any of the avenues that we're actually investigating.
Sir, you implied that you're investigating not a ArriveCan, but an expansion of the bottler allegations of what those allegations were. So can you expand a bit more on this for the interest and understanding of Canadians?
Mark? Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'll answer that. That's okay.
Let's have him take a first crack at it, and then if he doesn't answer it correctly, you can answer it after that. How about
So,
that?
Mr. President, Mr. Chair, as you know, it was referred to us by the CBSA through Bottler AI, and then ArriveCan came in after that. And there are multiple other complaints that were made that we are currently investigating. And I'd invite Mr. Flynn, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair, to add to my response.
Yes, to add some precision to that, all of the additional investigations I referred to earlier are not specific to ArriveCan CBSA or the Bottler AI matter. They are broader procurement matters that, as you can understand, as there's more attention in this space, that there are additional investigations and complaints that come to our attention.
Okay, well, it was testified in Mr. First's House of Commons appearance that Diane Daly, a CBSA official and former procurement manager, helped GC Strategies to write the RFP that they eventually won. So are you investigating that?
Well, again, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to comment on the specifics of the investigation. This came up through a committee. I'm not at liberty to explain any further with regards to our criminal investigation.
In March 2022, Ms. Daly sent an email to Bottler demanding that they turn over all their records to Dalian and Cordadix, even though they had no contractual obligations to do so, documents that were evidence of misconduct. Have you seen any additional indication that certain officials went out of their way to mess with the evidence of misconduct?
Again, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to speculate or even respond to any questions that's pertaining directly to the investigation.
Well, I'll keep asking the questions, and you're here. I'm a guest. I have a little bit of time left. According to you, Commissioner, would it have been possible for a company like GC Strategies to operate without support from government insiders and networks?
Mr. Chair, that's not for me to answer.
I'll try an easy one for you. How did you decide that the report warrants an investigation?
We received, Mr. Chair, we received a complaint, assessed the complaint, and began our investigation.
What's the difference between a review and an investigation?
As soon as we get a complaint, it's an investigation.
How long did it take for you to decide to investigate?
Mr. Chair, I don't have the exact timeline. I can go through some of the timelines that we got from the time we got the complaint.
When did you receive the allegations from the bottler?
It was from CBSA. It was January 31st, 2023.
And when did you apply for, when did you start an investigation process?
I don't have the exact time the next day. I don't have the exact information on that, but it would have started subsequently after the complaint.
According to your investigation's mandate, what would be considered criminal activity in this case?
Well, I'm not going to refer to this specific case, but any investigation that we do, there's a series of offense under the criminal code that could apply to investigations that we do.
The Auditor General in her report said she found no evidence to show that some CBSA employees complied with the agency's code of conduct by disclosing that they had been invited to dinners and other activities by contractors. Mr. Cameron McDonald and Mr. Anthony Atuno have been named in the GC's insider contracts. Are you investigating their associations and their contact throughout the ArriveCan project?
Again, Mr. Chair, this is part of the investigation. I'm not going to comment on.
I believe those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Beginning our second round, Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Commissioner, you confirmed that the RCMP raided the home of Mr. Christian Firth of GC Strategies, and you took the unusual step of informing the public of that search. Why?
Mr. Chair, I can answer
Yeah.
that. That decision was based on the fact that it had been revealed publicly and that there was public visibility in front of that location that demonstrated the RCMP was there. So at that point, it becomes a fool's errand to attempt to cover the fact that we were there and that we were executing a search warrant there.
So are you able to take us through the scene? If Mr. Firth was present, Mr. Firth told us that the RCMP searched digital devices. Is that true? Are you able to confirm that that's in fact what happened?
I am not able to confirm at this time.
So Mr. Brock asked you before, I want to cover these questions again. Has Mr. Christian Firth been arrested?
I'm not going to confirm that.
Has he been charged?
As I stated earlier, if Mr. Firth had been charged, there'd be a public record of that.
So is there a public record of any charges being laid in relation to your investigation into the ArriveCan matter?
Not that I'm aware of.
We're in possession of an access to information document. It's A2023-00306. It's a memorandum for the clerk of the Privy Council from that department, from the PCO for the Prime Minister. The documents state that in January of 2023, the Prime Minister requested briefs related to ArriveCan. Is the RCMP aware of those briefs?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any briefs.
So the document, Commissioner, goes on to say that the Prime Minister raised the issue of ArriveCan with the clerk of the Privy Council. Is the RCMP aware of those conversations and their contents?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any conversations with the Prime Minister and PCO as well as the contents.
So if it's helpful to the RCMP, I'd be happy to furnish you with this ATIP. Would you like it?
Again, it doesn't involve us. We want to make sure that any document that's brought into investigation is done properly. So you could keep the ATIP for now, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that those diligent folks from your agency who are behind you there caught that ATIP number when I offered it and can access that file. In the Auditor General's report, she noted that she referred information related to the cozy relationship of CBSA officials and certain vendors to the RCMP. Is that being investigated, Commissioner?
Again, Mr. Chair, we have multiple investigations ongoing based on information that were collected, so I'll leave my answer to that.
So it's important for Canadians to know if senior officials from the Liberal government are being investigated for criminality because there's been a reference made to you by an independent officer of Parliament. You said that you're unable to tell us who is the target of any of your investigations. So my question is this: if the evidence leads you there, will you commit to Canadians to interview any senior government official, including any minister, including the Prime Minister, if those conversations or interviews would be germane to your investigation?
Well, Mr. Chair, I can commit that our team will follow every single lead of investigation evidence and interview the people who we must interview in our investigation.
So that includes that would include anyone, including senior government officials or elected officials?
That, Mr. Chair, would include anyone.
On the topic of documents, Min Doan, who's the Chief Technology Officer, is alleged to have destroyed thousands of documents related to ArriveCan. Are you aware of those allegations?
Mr. Chair, I am not. I'd have to defer to Mr. Flynn, see if he is aware.
Again, that would be a matter that would or could be part of an ongoing investigation, and we would not be speaking to that today.
Could you tell us, with my last question, what penalties the intentional destruction of documents that are the subject of a criminal investigation, what are the potential penalties that someone would face if they were charged and convicted?
So in the context that you're asking the question, I believe it'd be inappropriate for me to get into details. However, I can very cautiously move outside of the context of the question, if you'll allow me to.
Please.
And say that anyone that takes any steps that thwarts a criminal investigation can face consequences for doing so. There are numerous offenses that could be applied in those situations, including obstruction. But I do not answer that in the context of the initial question. I just simply say, to try and aid you in your work today, that any destruction of documents that are relevant to criminal prosecution with intent to interfere with that could face criminal consequences.
Thank you very much. Next is Ms. Bradford. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to both of our witnesses for being with us today. Commissioner, you mentioned earlier that the leader of the Conservative Party sent you a letter demanding that you investigate ArriveCan. How does that impact your independence, and how did you respond to that letter?
We, Mr. Chair, upon receiving the letter, he responded to Mr. Poliev with regards that we are assessing all the information part of the overall investigation.
Can you provide members of this committee with a copy of that letter and your response?
I'd have to follow up with the team, yeah, if I can, yep.
Okay, thank you. Now, given the nature of what's been happening in the media and the questions that have been asked today, do either of you feel it's appropriate for the Leader of the Opposition or other political officials to attempt to interfere with the RCMP's independent work in investigations like this?
So, Mr. Chair, I would say that no one should interfere with the work of an ongoing investigation, regardless of the police organization that's leading that investigation.
Now, I've seen some allegations from some Conservative members that the RCMP is at the beck and call of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Is that true?
No, it's not, Mr. Chair. We have complete police independence since I've been in the chair, in my previous chair as well. The only dealings I've had with the Prime Minister or the Minister or other ministers is briefing on files, and I would say that it's more or less a one-way briefing more than anything else, and answering questions.
Okay, thank you. So as I'm sure you're aware, the committee voted to bring GC Strategies co-owner Kirsten Firth before the bar of the House of the Commons after he refused to answer questions here at the committee. Mr. Firth has stated that he did not want to or feel like he was able to answer certain questions specifically because of the RCMP's ongoing investigations into ArriveCan. I'm wondering if you could please explain to the committee, how does the RCMP deal with the concept of parliamentary privilege in parliamentary proceedings?
Well, it's Mr. Chair, it is a factor that we must contend with when we lead in our investigation, and we usually consult with some subject matter experts into the field to see what can be used, what not can be used. But it does pose a challenge as when we deal with this type of investigations.
So how does that work then, given that witnesses are protected by parliamentary privilege and the responses or information they provide cannot be used against them in a criminal investigation? What is the RCMP heard something in the committee testimony that relates to an investigation? Are you forced to find this information in another way then?
In most situations, I would say yes, we would be forced to find it another way due to the protections that you articulated, but there are so many variables to that would take a very highly skilled legal expert to analyze and give exact answers to that in those varying situations.
If I may add, Mr. Chair, to your answer, everything we produce in a criminal investigation must be disclosable and obtained legally. So this is sometimes a challenge for us when it comes to parliamentary privilege.
I understand. So to avoid this situation in the future, how can we ensure that witnesses feel safe and secure enough to be able to speak honestly in committee or other parliamentary proceedings?
Mr. Chair, with all due respect, I have to think about that one. How do we provide that safety net for the individuals that come so that they feel protected and whatnot? Mark?
And I think that's really a question that each individual would have to answer with their own legal advisors and potentially with advice from this committee's legal advisors.
I'd like to ask you a question about classified information and how it relates to ministers of the Crown and the Security of Information Act. Minister LeBlanc recently mentioned in a scrum that he'd ask you, Deputy Commissioner Flynn, what would happen hypothetically if he were to release classified information publicly. he said that you responded saying that the minister would be subject to criminal prosecution. Is that true?
That is correct. And what I stated was that anyone who reveals classified information is subject to the law equally. And obviously, in this case, those names are classified at this time, and to reveal them publicly would in fact be a criminal offense.
Thank you. So there's many rules and parliamentary procedures to adhere to as members of parliament, one of them being that you cannot do indirectly what you can't do directly. When you put out a tweet and say that the RCMP or law enforcement agency must do this or that, or insinuate that the RCMP lacks operational independence of the RCMP, one could argue that they could be indirectly trying to influence the RCMP. Could you share your opinion on that, Commissioner?
Well, one can argue, but our investigators across the country are very professional. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we will follow the information, the evidence to lead us to the potential charges and whatnot.
Thank you. I'm afraid that is the time, Ms. Bradford. Suivant, c'est Madame Sinclair-Desgagnés pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
2.5 minutes plus a few extra seconds. Now, you said the Auditor General was prepared to cooperate with you, but it's my understanding that you didn't ask for all of her files. And yet, this committee got wind of certain information, for example, a list of officials and public servants who accepted invitations to events, whereas it clearly violated the code of conduct. For example, and this can give you a sense of who's implicated with GC strategies among public servants, this kind of information that was sent through to the committee, is that the kind of information that you'll be going after using your own means, given that the Auditor General, knowing full well that the Auditor General has already done that work? Response. Well, when it comes to a criminal investigation, we have our own processes, and that evidence must be collected in a legal manner. Now, of course, anything collected by a parliamentary committee is subject to parliamentary privilege. Now, as I answered previously, it's sometimes a complex affair to get your hands on evidence when things are protected, for example, by parliamentary privilege. Question. I'm sure that if you asked the committee's permission to share the information with you, as we've done in previous occasions, the committee would have no issue providing you with the information that you require. Moreover, it makes me think this. Given the ArriveCan saga and your decision to cast a broader net than Butler AI and a general investigation of ArriveCan, did you listen to the proceedings of parliamentary committees? Is our work in some way helpful to the investigation led by the RCMP? Response. Of course, your work can always be helpful and useful if that information and evidence is permissible. Now, when parliamentarians are able to provide us with information, well, there's a whole issue of police independence. Now, that documentation that is submitted to us has to be done in an official manner so that when charges are laid and it goes to court, it must be legally permissible. Question. I know that you can't speak to specific evidence, but Mr. David, you admitted to some journalists that he had accounts abroad, offshore accounts. Is that the kind of situation where you can monitor those accounts, numbered accounts both in Canada and abroad, to determine whether there's illegal activity? Is that what you're doing as part of your investigation? Response. Well, in our investigation, all avenues are explored. And if a door is opened when it comes to information abroad, whatever information that may be, we take the appropriate steps. You're talking about accounts in tax havens as well? Yes, on the proviso that it falls within the purview of our investigation. Thank you.
For 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's clear, and particularly the many series of meetings we had in relation to this work, and we've also, of course, summoned Mr. Christian Firth under contempt of Parliament to answer questions that he failed to in another committee. It's clear throughout this process that we've investigated several instances over a long period of time, but this has been, I think, a shocking case to Canadians, but I think it's important to note that this work and what's happened in Parliament, particularly with Procurement Canada, has been really troubling. And I think this is one of the cases that is being highlighted. But I think what's here is a really deep concern I have, a systemic concern, a concern of systemic corruption that takes place in Procurement Canada. We notice this in this particular instance, but we've seen it several times, and we know this because these actors are some of the same actors that have been involved in Procurement Canada since as early as 2011. GC Strategies, for example, was a tenure to contracts by the government even before the Liberals were in power. They went unnoticed at that time, changed their company name when the election was called, and then when the Liberals took power, changed their name to GC Strategies. So we see these same actors, these two-person companies operating under the former government, operating under this government. We see this kind of behavior of contracts that become huge webs, these massive webs of subcontracting where even task authorizations are amended several times. At what point did the RCMP think of or open investigation or have any comments on this systemic nature of contracting, which seems to prefer certain actors versus others, particularly when it comes to non-competitive contracts? Do you have comments on that?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't have any comments on the procurement process itself. All I'm here for is to explain that we are investigating several files, from the first complaint that came in to the second one and others, that, as Mr. Markland mentioned earlier, pertaining to procurement.
Are you doing these investigations, would you say? How, since as early as you can remember in your work, has Procurement Canada been involved in these types of illicit contract practices?
I wouldn't be able, Mr. Chair, to respond to the question as to how long have I known or been involved in investigation of this nature. So.
Has there been similar investigations of this kind in previous?
Mr. Chair, I would have to go through our filing system to look at how many files we've looked at the procurement.
Would you say there's a pattern of this type of behavior?
Mr. Chair, that's not for me to determine if there's a pattern or not.
My last question, while we have this round, is in relation to the fact that this is a very public case, and we know that there's been political attempts, of course, to benefit from this very egregious situation. Has there been any instance that you can direct to this committee of any attempts of interference in your investigation?
To my knowledge, Mr. President, Mr. Chair, I should say that I am not aware of any interference whatsoever, being political or other means.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Turning now back to Mr. Barrett for 5 minutes, please.
Commissioner, you said you're investigating the ArriveCan scandal, the Arrive scam, because of the Auditor General's report. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, you would say, Mr. Chair, that it initiated in January 31st, 2023 with the referral from CBSA when it was Bottler AI, and then it grew from there.
Okay. So the Bottler AI investigation caused you to open an investigation into ArriveCan. It was not a reference from the Auditor General?
I'll ask Mark if you can clarify, but initially the complaint that was received, or the referral that was received to us or sent to us, was with regards to procurement process in general. And then...
Yeah, it's difficult to be precise on the timing of which elements, because when we have different sources of information coming in that generated the start of it, we can follow up, but again, likely that detail will be something that the investigators will not want to be made public, so we can follow up.
So you have the work of the Auditor General, that report. You have multiple other investigations that are being pursued through officers of Parliament. We have the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner, the Information Commissioner, the Privacy Commissioner, of course the Procurement Ombudsman completed a report, completed an investigation. The lobbying commissioner has received complaints and information related to this file. Have you been working with these other investigatory bodies?
The challenge that we have, so question was asked earlier of a similar nature. The challenge that we have when we're involved in criminal investigations is that there are procedural rules, legal rules, privacy rules, and different rules with respect to criminal liability depending on which process you're in. So when we look at it from a law enforcement perspective, something that the Auditor General or Parliamentary Committee may be able to compel someone to come and speak to, they are protected in doing so in some of those processes, or there may be a determination later that the person did not provide that information of their own free will, and therefore we can't use it. There are times where that actually creates significant challenges for our investigation, where we will learn something, can't use it, and then there are subsequent questions about how we are pursuing certain investigative avenues that are based on a process that's not fair to the accused.
Have you requested or received documents from the government in your investigation of the $60 million Arrive scam?
Again, that relates to details of our investigation that we won't be speaking to, and I don't have all of that information to provide that detail, even if it did not.
So we've seen the government hide documents and information from the RCMP before, including in the Prime Minister's illegal vacation to Billionaire Island and his SNC-Lavalin scandal, where cabinet confidence was invoked to protect what is a political problem. If you're met with the same obstruction in this case, what will the RCMP do to recover that information, or is cabinet confidence just the end of the road?
So I'm not confirming whether or not there was any claims of any privilege on this, so just to be clear on that. We pursue all the legal rights that we have in our investigations to gather all the information that we can lawfully obtain. So,
Commissioner, we heard shocking revelations about the Sustainable Development Technology Canada, otherwise known as the $1 billion Green Slush Fund, that the $319 million tax dollars had been appropriated where conflicts of interest were indicated. This is found in the Auditor General's report. Are you aware of these findings? A quick yes or no, if you could, please.
Not in the finest detail there, Mr. Chair.
The House has ordered that the documents, the work product of the Auditor General, the documents from Sustainable Development Technology Canada, the documents from the Industry Minister, all be delivered to the Parliamentary Law Clerk and delivered to the RCMP. I have two questions. Do you undertake or commit to reviewing the information that's presented to you following this order of the House? And will you update the public, commit to updating the public with what the outcome of that review is?
Well, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of the discussion that took place or if there's an appetite to share it with the RCMP. I would say that I am open for a review, providing that the information that we receive can be disclosed and obtained in a legal fashion. So if there is a follow-up to do, that we can do the proper follow-up.
Thank you very much. Up next, Ms. Khalid, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I'll start by perhaps just saying what's on the mind, I think, of a lot of people. It's becoming increasingly disturbing watching individuals question the operational independence of law enforcement in this country. Just earlier today in Ethics Committee, the Conservative MP for Brantford Brant, Mr. Larry Brock, outright questioned the independence of the RCMP by claiming that because the Commissioner of the RCMP is appointed by the Governor in Council and that they report to the Minister of Public Safety, that the RCMP has a political agenda when they act in their role. So I really do want to know your reaction as to with that type of insinuation, that the RCMP is not in fact operationally independent and is instead being governed by political interests.
So, Mr. Chair, I can confirm that the RCMP is, the operational independence exists. As I mentioned earlier, the only time I've had a chance to sit down with the Prime Minister or our minister or other ministers was to brief on key operational files for situational awareness only. Never once have we been subject to interference or suggestions or pressure to do something, and I can confirm that for 37 years of my career, from the last 6-7 years dealing at this level, I've never been asked to do anything, and I'm sure Mr. Flynn could probably add to that.
I would agree, and from an RCMP perspective, we take great pride in that, and you'll hear it in my voice whenever I've been questioned with respect to direction in the past. It is part of our training, it is part of our DNA. We have that all the way from our early careers, whether we're involving municipal council, provincial members of parliament at the provincial level or the federal. We work very independently and without influence.
Thank you for that. Now, I personally am very concerned with this type of rhetoric because I believe that it erodes and corrodes trust in our democratic institutions and in the operational independence of the RCMP. So I'm just wondering if you can perhaps help us understand how disinformation, especially coming from people that are supposed to be credible, that have a large following perhaps, how does that impact our public institutions and the work that you do, especially in open investigations?
So I have to be cautious, again, with respect to misinformation. I always like to remain neutral in all of these appearances and to provide the information that we can without impacting what our mandate is. So I take great pride in my work. I'm here as an official to help with the committees, and we like to focus our attention to providing assistance to committees. And that's where I'd like to keep my testimony today.
I appreciate that, and I understand the sensitivity of an open investigation, and that's why I'm so concerned about the level of disinformation that is being spread, and quite frankly, questioning the RCMP's independence in this matter. So I guess my natural next step question is, if the Conservatives don't like the outcome of your investigation, will they malign your organization? Have you started thinking about what those next steps are going to be?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, our objective is at the conclusion of these investigations is share with the general public as to our findings so that we're open and transparent, which builds trust with the population. I can't comment on any comments that would be made with regards to the RCMPs.
Maybe we can talk in a hypothetical situation rather than talking specifically with respect to an open investigation, to ask, how do you deal with disinformation, misinformation being spread about your organization, and what steps do you take to ensure that your perceived independence as well as your actual independence is well known to the Canadian public?
So we often face challenges with our ability to share information about what is happening in our investigations for many of the reasons we spoke today. And then even post-arrest and when we start criminal proceedings, there are challenges. So the RCMP has a transparency website. You will see that we as officials are regularly engaging with media and with the public. You will see a lot of our members out with the public at significant events. And I'll remind everybody that this is a weekend that is on June 23rd. We will be dealing with a tragic anniversary of one of the most significant terrorism attacks against Canada. You will see RCMP members out at those events, again, talking to people, sharing information that we can. When it comes to an arrest and charges being laid, then we fall into another category where our ability to speak publicly is limited because of procedural elements in the criminal code that speak to how processes are run and the rights of accused to give full answer and defense, and that information that might impact those proceedings that is released by officials, police included, could impact that fairness and then could actually impact the likelihood that that trial will proceed against the individual. So we're constantly battling between a desire to be transparent, a desire to share with the public, and competing interest of privacy and rights of the individuals and the rights to Canadians.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Turning now to start of the third round, Mr. Genuis, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just following Ms. Bradford's question, are you saying that revealing names in the NCCOP report would be a criminal offense?
Any name in the NCCOP report that is classified, that was revealed by an individual who had access to that information through proper means, security clearances, et cetera, would be committing a violation of the Security Offences Act.
Okay, thank you. Now, of course, the government can change security classification of names. There's a difference between changing classification, revealing classified information. But I take your point that for a person who had access to classified information, revealing that information would be an offense. What about a case where a person might imply a name? Perhaps if a person said that after reading report, they think a certain named person should not be allowed to join or remain in a particular caucus, would that implied reference to a name be a criminal offense?
It's something that would be reviewed to determine whether or not there's an offense that's there, but it really depends on the circumstances and the detailed circumstances of how the person learned of that name.
Okay, let's say a person had received security clearance, has read the report, and then they say, you know what, after reading the report, I don't think person X should be allowed to be in caucus Y. Is that a criminal offense?
So again, that depends on where that individual did it and the classification of that name.
Suppose this individual has received security classification, security clearance to receive this information, and then they say in public, in front of a microphone, having read the report, I don't think person X should be allowed in caucus Y. Would that be a criminal offense, a violation of the Secrets Act?
Again, that would be something that we would have to look into to determine.
Okay, because there is a CBC story published on June 14th that says, after reading an unredacted report from one of Canada's intelligence oversight bodies, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says he now thinks that independent MP Han Dong shouldn't be allowed back into the Liberal caucus. So I will share that information with you for your consideration. I believe very much in the importance of adherence to the rule of law, of course. Now, we have an extraordinary situation before us today. I think you'll agree it's extraordinary. We've got senior RCMP leadership before a parliamentary committee in a context where concerns about NDP Liberal government corruption have brought us to the point of having multiple different criminal investigations involving federal government corruption, multiple instances involving ArriveCan contractors, as well as other investigations. Could you just help us go through and itemize all the investigations that are ongoing involving the federal government or relationships between the federal government and external contractors?
That is not something that I have the information that I'm able to provide to you today. You're asking for a very broad number of things in that question that I don't have access to that information. And it would, in the context you're asking is about active investigations, it is not something that we would respond even if I had that information.
Okay, it's interesting that you said it's very broad, and maybe that's illustrative of the problem, right? I mean, I'm asking you just to identify all the investigations that you as the RCMP are currently conducting involving government corruption or corrupt relationships between contractors and governments, and you've told me that they're too broad a list. It's too big a list to share. Just on ArriveCan, then, if you could walk through the various investigations involving ArriveCan and ArriveCan contractors. So you said there's the main investigation that started kind of post Auditor General's report. There's another investigation involving the same contractors. How many different RCMP investigations are ongoing that involve this core group of suspect contractors?
Clarification, I didn't say in the initial part of your question, I did not say that the list was too broad. I said the question was too broad. With respect to the number of investigations specific to ArriveCan.
Sorry, I don't think the question is that. I'm just asking how many police investigations are there into government corruption? There would have been a time when it would probably have been easy to say there are none, but we're living in this different reality with the current government. So, like, how many investigations are currently ongoing involving government corruption? That seems like a pretty clear, straightforward question. Just how many are there? And
I think, Mr. Chair, it would be jumping to the fact with regards to corruption. We are currently investigating several files that are looking at the procurement process that could lead to an element of corruption. But at this point in time, I'm not saying that we're anywhere close to that. And again, I don't want to get into any details of.
You haven't laid charges yet, right? But there are investigations into it, right?
There's, as I mentioned earlier, there's numerous investigations, and with investigations, you can open up the criminal code. There's a variety of offense there that can be applied when we're dealing with an investigation. And again, I will let the investigation continue its pace, and any evidence that brings us forward to a criminal accusation, we will act accordingly.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Ms. Shanahan, you're next for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and I thank the witnesses for being here today. And indeed, I don't think there's a member of this committee that would seek to prevent or interfere or otherwise jeopardize the investigations that you're doing. And so that's why I'm very surprised at the line of questioning that colleagues on the Conservative side are pursuing, but maybe it's because one of the individuals mentioned is a card-carrying member of the Conservative Party. So could be that there's something to hide there, but I certainly don't want to interfere with any investigation in the case of Mr. Yeo. Or any other person. But the reason why you were, the RCMP was invited here today, and I appreciate that you did accept this invitation on the second go-around, because you made it very clear, Commissioner Duhem, that you would not answer any questions, and I appreciate that from both you and Mr. Flynn, that you would not answer any questions that could potentially jeopardize your work, but indeed that you would be here to help us as committee members to understand your general approach in conducting criminal investigations, particularly, and this is what is of interest to us here, particularly in those areas which touch on to different operations of government, of the civil service, of you mentioned earlier that the complaint first came, or the referral first came from the CBSA regarding procurement, and so I'd like to understand better how the RCMP does interact with the various independent officers of Parliament, the Auditor General being one, the Ombuds, Procurement Ombuds being another, the Commissioner of Ethics and Conflict of Interest. So is it something that you're waiting for a referral or a complaint, or are you generally surveying sort of the day-to-day?
So we are, I wouldn't use the word surveying day-to-day, but we're aware of our surroundings, okay? So we're aware when information comes to light. There are times where we get referrals from various offices and officials. I'm at a loss for the word, but different offices is the word I'll use, where they will tell us that they've discovered some irregularity and they will offer to assist. At that time, we will likely engage with advisory crowns that we have on many of our investigative units that aid us in dealing with the various complications of receiving information from different offices that have different types of authorities, including compelling authorities.
Mr. Flynn, can you explain a little bit more advisory crowns? So these would be lawyers that you're working with?
Yeah, so there are Crown attorneys as part of public prosecution services that we have access to during our criminal investigations that deal with specific legal matters that will impact the viability of a prosecution. So they're not giving us legal advice for the RCMP. They're giving us advice with respect to actions that we may take that could have an impact on the viability of a subsequent prosecution. I use that as an example pursuant to your question, because many of the different officers of Parliament have different authorities and in some cases compelling authorities to gain information that are different than and have different legal thresholds than the authorities that are available to the RCMP or police in general for use in criminal prosecutions. So if we possess such information and use information that has come from, say, for example, a much lower threshold than what we could have obtained the information, we would seek their advice as to whether or not we should receive it without a warrant, or we have to seek judicial authorization to get it through a production order or a search warrant, as some examples. And then that would enable proper judicial oversight into the process under which that information is going to be provided to us, and ensure that we get it at the thresholds that would allow for use in a prosecution and a successful prosecution could come. So again, to stress, they're not giving us legal advice, they're giving us advice with respect to the things that we may do or should not do that would impact the viability of a prosecution.
Well, thank you for that, because when I think of the Auditor General, for example, who's governed by an Act of Parliament, and there are some very specific articles in that act regarding confidentiality of information received and so on. I mean, the Auditor General is very clear that she does cooperate with the RCMP, but are there sort of guidelines that you have worked out? And in other words, does it have to be very specific what you're looking for? What are the kinds of things that help you work with the Auditor General's office?
So the answer is that it depends on the circumstances, but as I described, it's not as simple as the Auditor General or another Office of Parliament simply saying, I will give you all of my information because of the points that you raised. There are things that are able to be provided, again, without specific examples, and other things that would require additional authorities in order for us to possess them and use them in process.
I'm afraid
can we be reassured that work happens?
I'm afraid that is. I allowed lots of extra time, Ms. Shannon. The government will have another opportunity. Turning now to Madame Secrétaire Desgagnés pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Just to come back to my previous question about tax havens, if I may. In what context or to what extent are you capable, legally speaking, in your investigations to first go and see what activities are carried out in these accounts, perhaps tax haven accounts, and monies, for example, that might hypothetically be being funneled back to officials? How far can you go in your investigations in that regard? Response. As far as the RCMP is concerned, we cooperate with our international partners. And in the example that you just raised, if there's an account in a tax haven and it can be tied back to an individual in Canada, we follow that trace and the information that is required to lay charges. Of course, we have to cooperate with the country in which the account is held, and that's no easy job because, as you said, there are tax havens, but we go to great lengths to get our hands on that information. Question, is that common that your investigations take you to as far as tax havens? Response, well, I can't give you a figure on that, but yes, we investigate accounts that are held in tax havens and where there's money laundering, and that often leads us back to tax havens. Question, do those other countries cooperate with you? I'm not talking about the tax haven countries themselves, but other countries as well. Response, well, I'd have to dig up my files on that in order to respond to you faithfully and properly. And have to get back to your question, is it rare that countries cooperate or is it quite commonplace? Response, well, I don't want to go out on a limb and tell you whether it's easy or it ain't, but I'll stop there. Question, so you've never personally had cause to do this? Response, no. Personally, not in my career, no. And not even with regard to ArriveCan. Response, well, of course, as I said previously, we can't talk about the specifics of an investigation, but nothing suggests that this particular investigation will lead us to tax havens. But as I said, we'll follow the trace of the information, we'll continue our investigation, and we'll go where the investigation takes us. Response, well, apparently there are accounts in tax havens, and this was flagged on a number of occasions. And there's no legitimate reason to have an account in a tax haven unless they're interested, these players, in international activities and international trade and business.
Next, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I do want to ask a few more questions related to ArriveCan, considering this, since you're here in relation to that. How is the RCMP ensuring the integrity of the investigations that are currently underway?
So our investigation is being governed by multiple processes. So number one, we have what is referred to as a command triangle. That's an independent group of individuals who determine what actions will be taken. There is oversight under a criminal operations officer within the area that investigation is being conducted. And then from a headquarters perspective, we also have a governance role where there is regular reporting and oversight on a broad number of operations across the country. They use that for multiple purposes.
Just as a matter of time, thank you for that response. Another question is, can you elaborate on what the charges would be in general for anyone who has falsified documents, task authorizations, or overbilled the government with fraudulent information?
In a broad context, not specific to any investigation,
exactly.
I think you used the key word in the start of your question where you described the activity as fraud. There are potential offenses such as that.
And what would that mean? What kind of charges?
Fraud.
Oh, sorry, what kind of criminal penalty would that entail?
I would have to go back to the criminal code. I don't remember the exact penalties for,
That's okay.
for those sections.
Given that both the Parliamentary Committee and the RCMP are investigating similar issues and may end up with similar evidence, how do you protect the integrity of key evidence from being leaked, for instance?
Well,
sorry, there's no, for just leaked.
So during our criminal investigations, there are expectations that our investigators will conduct themselves appropriately and professionally. There are internal consequences and there are potential criminal consequences for them leaking information. And then with respect to other bodies and entities that are conducting similar investigations, they'd be governed by whatever rules apply to those areas.
In previous, you implied that there were multiple investigations running in parallel. Will Canadians have to wait for all investigations to be concluded, or will we hear results as you arrive at them?
I would expect you will hear of results as we arrive at them, as long as there is no impact on other investigations through revealing that information.
And just to clarify that point, you mean if these multiple investigations are connected in any way?
That is the most likely way there would be conflict that would lead to us not revealing it publicly. So if we had 5 people in 5 different offenses that are disconnected, there would not likely be any conflict in revealing that we had arrived at charges against one individual.
Thank you.
Like identity fraud.
That is
versus,
the time.
Sorry, next question.
Now to Mr. Brock for 5 minutes, please.
Commissioner, can you confirm that the next general election will not impede or interfere with your multiple investigations into fraudulent procurement practices and the potential laying of criminal charges?
Mr. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, the independence of policing is a key thing for us, and it's respected, and we will not change the course because there's a general
So the answer is no, it will not.
That's right.
Thank you, Commissioner. To either gentleman, the majority of MPs in the House of Commons voted for a Conservative motion that orders the Auditor General, the Department of Industry, and SDTC, the Green Slush Fund, to collect and submit them to the Parliamentary Law Clerk. The motion passed essentially programs the Parliamentary Law Clerk to hand over files to the RCMP.
Yeah, just relevance. I know we flip back and forth on topics, but this is we're here today to discuss ArriveCan.
Well, I'm going to allow, I give latitude. This is a matter before Parliament. Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Nice try, Ms. Shanahan. To hand over files to the RCMP, they will be delivered to the RCMP headquarters. Will you commit, Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner, to undertaking a review of those documents?
I can say that any information that comes to the RCMP will go through appropriate level of review, using the appropriate resources to do so.
And I don't know if you recognize the importance of a thorough police investigation into the Green Slush Fund. It's been discovered that over 186 different conflicts of interest, not flagged, not acted upon, which resulted in the delivery
Point of
of
order, Chair.
300.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to have lots of time to talk about the SDTC. If the Conservatives are bored
That's
with
not a
the
point of order.
RIVCAN, we can certainly conclude it.
Ms. Shannon, that's not a point, but I will note your willingness to have the RSP back for the Green Slush Fund. Mr. Brock, you have the floor.
Yeah, it's amazing the extent that the Liberal government will do to block our attempts to get to some answers. So 340 million taxpayer dollars sent out. If this were a publicly traded company, charges would have been laid, people would have been fired. There's such a difference between the public and the private spheres. So will you give Canadians and parliamentarians your commitment to reviewing this as swiftly as possible?
Mr. Chair, I think Mark was pretty clear on the information we'd receive and the actions that we would take.
Thank you. Now, I listened very carefully, Deputy Commissioner, to your exchange with my colleague, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Barrett gave you a hypothetical about potential charges, particularly in relation to the attempts by Mindone to delete thousands and thousands of relevant emails. Your response piqued my interest. Your response was, any person who thwarts a criminal investigation will potentially face consequences. And that's true for every Canadian, isn't it?
That's correct, and for precision, my answer was not in the context of Mindone.
Right. No, I understand. It was in a general context, but applies to every Canadian. But the same can't be said for our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, who single-handedly obstructed your investigation into an obstruction of justice charge in his involvement in the SNC-Lavalin matter. Name one Canadian,
order.
Commissioner.
We're not talking about SNC-Lavalin either. Relevant.
Chair, can we put an
Thank
end
you.
to this?
No, I do have to hear points of order. Mr. Brock, you have a minute 40 seconds.
Commissioner or Deputy Commissioner, name one Canadian other than Justin Trudeau who can single-handedly block a criminal investigation. I'll give you some time to think about that.
I can take that question immediately. I can say that there is not a single Canadian that can block an RCMP independent criminal investigation, period.
Right. But Justin Trudeau did. Now, I'm looking at your conclusion and recommendation report into the SNC-Lavalin matter, and I'm looking at paragraph 23, which you probably don't have before you. And I want to basically reiterate this so that Canadians can understand where this investigation is at. Although you reached a conclusion not to charge Justin Trudeau, you indicate in 23 that your report does not translate to the absence of a criminal offense. Should additional evidence be uncovered corroborating a criminal intent to obstruct, it would be recommended that the occurrence be reopened for further investigation. So if Justin Trudeau cooperated with you and released cabinet confidences, particularly in relation to the firing of Jody Wilson-Raybould, would that further your investigation?
Mr. Chair, I'd be speculating of the type of information that was received. We operate in the process, in the judicial process, and without having all the knowledge of the authority of the Prime Minister, I'll just leave it at that. But there are different rules governing different entities and processes.
Brief last question, Mr. Brock.
Do I still have time?
You got one last question.
Thank you. That doesn't answer the question. If Justin Trudeau released cabinet confidences to you, gave you full transparency, full accountability, would that be sufficient evidence for you to finally conclude whether or not reasonable and probable grounds exist to charge a sitting prime minister? Yes or no?
If we had the totality of the information, Mr. Chair, we would be in a position to better assess the outcome of a file.
Thank you very much. I turn now online to Mr. Weiler. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do want to thank Commissioner Duhem and Deputy Commissioner Flynn for being here today. And I know you're doing your best to provide us with all the information that you can within the challenges of making sure that you don't in any way compromise the investigations that you're undergoing. And certainly a lot of this questioning would be easier at the conclusion of an investigation to provide light without providing a risk of that kind of a compromise of the investigation. But Commissioner, I was hoping you might be able to share with this committee if the RCMP or can the RCMP compel information from the government or its agencies in order to aid in investigations?
So, Mr. Chair, my experience is, again, as I mentioned earlier, we need the right documents, judicial process to obtain information from other government departments so we can introduce them in a judicial procedures if we get to the point that we lay charges.
Thank you, Commissioner. In terms of the resources that you have at your disposal, would you say that those resources are robust enough to pursue these types of investigations?
Mr. Chair, I have full confidence in the investigators that we have, and on occasion, it's happened on occasion that we had to get subject matter experts from outside of law enforcement to help us better understand the type of files that we're investigating.
And Commissioner, could you maybe just please expand on what the process might be for accessing those types of external resources to help in these types of investigations?
We would consult with other policing colleagues, or look at the academy side where some of them are SMEs in certain field. It could be fraud. It could be any type of field that could help our investigators, educate our investigators, but also help them in the investigation.
Thank you. So whether that's an investigation looking at public officials or whether that's an investigation looking at organized crime, terrorism, or so forth, do you feel that the RCMP has sufficient resources?
Well, I always say when you ask a chief of police or commissioner if we have sufficient resources, every chief of police across the country would say we never have enough resources because we want to do everything. The RCMP has resources in which the environment in which we operate shifts. I wouldn't say daily, but shifts quite rapidly, where we prioritize the files that we have, keeping in mind public safety is the number one priority for the organization.
Thank you, and I certainly take your point on that. And complex cases like this, or perhaps thinking of things like financial crime and money laundering, these are areas that are quickly evolving. And I understand that it's important that law enforcement has the right resources to be able to combat continually evolving nature of those threats. But changing tacks a little bit, I was hoping you might be able to describe to this committee what the risks might be of prematurely divulging too much information related to an ongoing investigation.
Yeah, the risk is to the integrity of the investigation itself, and if we were to start releasing names of people that were interviewing, accused, you could find yourself for putting these people at risk. You could put at risk other people that are associated to these people that are hiding evidence, and that's one of the reasons why we don't release names that until if charges are laid, then through the judicial process that's made public. That's when we'll comment, but throughout the investigation, we do not comment out of respect to keeping the integrity of the investigation.
Thank you. And we know that the work done by parliamentary committees is very important. And it is a way that members are able to hold the government and its agencies accountable. But we also know that it's equally important for law enforcement to maintain their operational independence, as we've discussed so far today, and to preserve the integrity of investigations. So how can we as parliamentarians balance our roles and responsibilities to look at and evaluate information in committees which is in the public interest without interfering or compromising an ongoing criminal investigation?
I think it's important, Mr. Chair, that people recognize that you are governed by a set of rules and parameters when you hold your hearings, and that's why people feel come to these committees and can speak freely. On the judicial side of things, on the criminal operations side of things, obviously the parameters are slightly different. I encourage the committee to continue to do their work, and if we can gain a better understanding of existing situation, I think it's a benefit to everyone.
Thank you very much. That is the time now beginning the fourth and final round. Mr. Stewart, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner for being here today. With both the Chair of the committee and I being from New Brunswick, I would like to start off by paying respect to our 3 fallen heroes from Moncton. It's been 10 years this month since we lost RCMP Constables Fabrice Gévaudan, Dave Ross, and Douglas Larch. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families whose lives were changed forever that tragic June day in Moncton. We will never forget the bravery of the 3 men and their RCMP colleagues showed protecting their fellow citizens at my home province in New Brunswick. One of the questions I have here today is, I understand the RCMP has a budget of $49 million for the foreign interference investigation. I'm just curious to see if there's a separate budget for the RCMP to investigate the Arrive Can scandal, and if so, what's the amount for that budget?
So, Mr. Chair, I'll start before I hand it over to Mark. I'll just start by recognizing I thank you for your comments with regards to our 3 fallen members. In fact, it's 10 years ago that this tragic incident, sad incident, happened that took the lives of 3 brave individuals, of 3 brave RCMP members. As for the budget, the amount that you referred to, it was 49.8 to 48.9. That was from, was it HASA or? That was from an MC that went through a couple months ago, and Mark could further expand, but the budget for the organization is, there's a pot of money that comes into the organization, not always dedicated to a certain type of offense that we're actually investigating. And Mark can elaborate on the budget when it comes to federal policing.
Yeah, I think it's key, as the Commissioner stated, that the $48.9 million is funding to look at a certain type of problem, not to fund a specific investigation. When you're looking at the broad federal policing budget, without getting into the complicated elements of it, we're over $800 million budget for federal policing. You'll see anything up to maybe $1 billion, anything down to $600 million. And we apply that based on the priorities that we have.
Thank you. Was there a specific number just for the Arrive Can investigation? That's kind of what I was looking for, that number, if you had it.
Okay, so we do not allocate a set number of dollars. There are investigative documents that do speak to budget projections for investigations, but they are certainly not limited to that. It is all just to inform senior management what an investigation is costing, so we can include that in our projections.
Okay, thank you. One of the questions I had, this has never been my sort of immediate file, but I've had a lot of questions about it over the past year. One thing that really struck me, and it could be coincidental, but I was curious to find out your opinion. The day that Christian Firth was brought before the bar, during that testimony, what's that?
Or?
Not the barn, the bar.
Oh, the bar.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's a different story. But apparently, like during his testimony, he said something that caught my interest, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he essentially said that the RCMP investigated his home the day before. It might have been the morning of, but in my mind right now, it's the day before. Is there anything significant about that proximity?
Nothing whatsoever. I'm not aware of any connection between the two activities.
Okay.
Nor, Mr. Chair, do we have the list of people when they're appearing and in front of what committee they're appearing, so.
Right. Well, no, this was the second time it had happened in history and the first time in 111 years, so it was very publicly known that something significant was going to transpire in the House of Commons. I had never heard of it myself, actually, to be honest, at the time, but I was curious to see if there's a link between the proximity. Do you feel the RCMP has the full cooperation of the Office of the Auditor General to do this investigation?
I know the Auditor General, we have a really good relationship, and I am convinced that we have 100% cooperation from her and her team.
Okay, thank you. One question I have, it's sort of a hypothetical question, but actually before I ask it, how much time do I have, Chair?
About 10, 15 seconds. You better ask your question.
Oh my God, 10, 15 seconds. Okay. Do you feel that you have sufficient resources, and what would the timeline be to carry out the investigation?
So as I responded earlier, the timeline for any investigation, I never pronounce myself on the timeline because when you interview one person, that might open to 10 different people that you must interview afterwards. And I use also the example that our cell phones today, if you go 10 years ago, it was just a cell phone, or maybe 15 years ago. Right now, it's a mini computer. Some are encrypted, so it takes additional time for us. And this is just one cell phone. So you can imagine when we seize laptops and whatnot, it just takes more time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Up next is Ms. Yip. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Have you had any issues receiving information from government agencies such as CBSA, in this case, in the RCMP's investigations?
I'm not aware of any issues, but I'm also not at a level to know all those details, but certainly nothing that's been raised to my attention.
What about other departments?
Again, nothing that's been raised to my attention.
Okay. Should Canadians have trust that Canada's rule of law is being upheld?
I have significant confidence in Canada's rule of law.
Well, that being said, do you feel that public officials are held to a higher standard than the regular public, or is it the same threshold of accountability?
Well, there are specific offenses that deal with public officials, anywhere from security clearances, depending on their role, breach of trust type charges, depending on which role the people are in. So there are specific offenses that apply to public officials, again, in the broad sense of it. I wouldn't call that a higher account. The law applies equally to everybody, and there are specific elements of specific offenses that would only apply if an individual is in certain positions of trust.
So if it's not higher, then what would you say? It's just part of the job?
I wouldn't say it's part of the job. It is a fact that the criminal code applies equally to everyone as to other acts. So if you're in a position that certain actions you undertake or don't undertake through an omission, you could be subject to penalties based on those unique offenses.
In your opening statement, there is the RCMP faces a delicate balance in all of your investigative efforts. What steps does the RCMP take to mitigate any future harm that may occur throughout the investigation?
So, Mr. Chair, when I mentioned delicate balance is really delicate balance between the right to know and the need to know. And when you are investigating a file of this nature, there is a strong appetite by Canadians to understand and know what took place. But again, that's a balance where, as I said earlier, we want to make sure we protect the integrity of the investigation. So.
If Canadians have information where would they go to provide this information to the RCMP?
There are different ways that information can be provided to the RCMP. There are some 1-800 tip lines when it comes to the national security side. It can be reported online in certain areas as well. And there's other ways that that can be reported with regards to remaining anonymous.
So also in the opening statement, it mentioned that the RCMP is investigating and using all available information, including the Auditor General's Performance Audit Report and the Procurement Ombudsman Procurement Practice Review of the RIVCAN. What information are you looking at or for within the Procurement Ombudsman Procurement Practice Review?
Mr. Chair, any information that would help us as previously mentioned, a criminal code offense, there's certain elements to a criminal code offense. So once we start getting a picture of what the offense could be, we are looking for any information that can assist us to support us in the elements of a criminal offense so that we could lay the appropriate charges.
Is there anything that you would like to mention that you haven't answered in other questions?
Not really, Mr. Chair. Just to reinforce the fact that I have full confidence in the professionals that we have in this organization that is leading this investigation. And as I committed earlier, at the end of the investigation, considering if the multiple files are not interconnected, we will release the information and inform the Canadian public of the work we've done.
Thank you very much. Suivant encore, dernière fois, c'est Madame Sinclair Dingagé pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
For a final round, Ms. Sinclair-Degagné, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Now, in any investigation, when thousands of emails are deleted from an email inbox, is that considered an obstruction of justice? Mr. Chair, without having all the information at my disposal, well, it could indeed amount to an obstruction of justice, but I'm not apprised of all the details of what's occurred, what's been deleted, so it's difficult for me to make a definitive statement in the matter. Thank you. In the case of ArriveCan, it was drawn to our attention, the fact that was drawn to our attention that thousands of emails were deleted by a public servant before they left on sick leave. Now, Mr. Flynn said earlier in response to a question that he wasn't informed of potential cases of obstruction of justice. Is that because you weren't aware that there were thousands of emails deleted that could compromise certain public servants and officials? I'll allow Mr. Flynn to elaborate on his previous comment.
The context under which you're asking it at this time, my answer was with respect to any obstruction from any government entity with respect to what we were doing. In the context of this investigation, my answer has been consistent. I'm not going to speak to anything with respect to the ongoing investigation into ArriveCan.
Mais votre réponse.
But your answer was that you had never come across any obstruction or cases of non-cooperation from public servants and officials. So if there was no obstruction or cases of no cooperation, well, that's kind of contradictory, isn't it? Deleting thousands of emails amounts in and of itself to obstruction when there's an investigation underway. And we know that that occurred in the case of the ArriveCan investigation. And yet you stated that you were not witness to any single case of obstruction. I'm just trying to wrap my head around that. How is it possible that what you've said is contradictory, is it not? Could you clarify?
I believe at all that it is contradictory. What the question, in the context of the question that I was asked that said there was no obstruction, I don't recall the exact details or have a transcript to read of it, but if you'll go back to it, it was with respect to a broad definition that has such and such an organization obstructed. The question you're asking me now is related to a very discrete act of an individual in the context, I believe that you're asking it in the context of an individual within the ArriveCan app.
Mais je sais que vous ne pouvez pas répondre à ça, mais donc...
I know you can't answer that specific question, but just to clarify, it is possible, and perhaps you can't say yay or nay, but it is still possible that obstruction did take place in the case of ArriveCan. It is still theoretically a possibility that occurred.
Absolutely on an individual basis, but I maintain my answer in the other context that there are not organizations obstructing us in our investigation.
Voilà.
Donc des
Merci
individus, mais
beaucoup.
pas des...
So individuals but not organizations.
C'est Mr. Desjardins once again for your last 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To the RCMP Commissioner, are you familiar with the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Are you familiar that it cites, quote, the RCMP have not proven to Canada that they are even capable of holding themselves to account? Are you familiar with that passage?
Not familiar with it. Don't remember reading it, but I don't discount that if you're saying that it's in there. I'll take your word for it.
You don't remember reading it?
Well, it's been a while, and there's a lot of information in the report that came out.
Well, I recommend reading it again. The crisis is quite urgent and it's ongoing, I'll turn my attention to the questions I have related to it. Considering that you haven't read it in a while, I'd suggest that you do, particularly in advance to the questions that I would ask. And if you can't answer them, I'd hope that you can supply them in writing, because it is, of course, a national emergency. A national emergency. Please, and I hope you can understand the gravity of this case and these issues. It's been ongoing. We've now had 5 years since the tabling of the national inquiry. We've had hundreds of women come forward talking about the misconduct of the RCMP. In Alberta alone, we've had a case where a 33-year-old constable was charged and arrested with child sexual exploitation. The families and victims of that are scared, and they feel as though justice has not been met. The officer was suspended with pay. Do you find that to be justice?
So, Mr. Chair, I did not say that I did not consider this a crisis. The question that was asked to me is if I remember the line that the committee member read. And I, of all people, I understand the crisis that was brought to us. The RCMP has a unit that looked at all the recommendation, and I've had a chance for the last 1.5 years to travel across this great country and meet with the folks who are doing the work on the ground with the different communities, and I can tell you that there's some excellent work going on based on the recommendations that came out.
With all due respect, it has to be more urgent. To the Commissioner, you have to understand, this is every single day. This is lives of real people, women who do not have trust in the RCMP. It's a critical issue of national import. And should we not have justice, like the case I just mentioned, it creates real distrust. Real distrust. A 33-year-old constable at the RCMP was charged and arrested for child sexual exploitation and received a suspension with pay. Is that justice?
Mr. Chair, I wish to remind the committee member that there's also a criminal investigation that's taken part, and what he's referring to right now is the internal process that the organization has when it comes to code of conduct investigations.
So would that be justice?
Justice will be served through the criminal courts.
And what steps will you take other than updating the uniform to directly support the work that needs to be done to ensure that the RCMP can gain more trust with Indigenous peoples and their nations? Or is it about time that we actually enhance the policing agreements that are put in place with First Nations and allow First Nations, Inuit and Métis to police themselves?
So, Mr. Chair, I can confirm with you that the entire organization is aware and is doing all they can to rebuild the trust and work with the communities across this country to rebuild that trust and to assist the communities when we can.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Turning down to Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
A point of order before you start my time. A number of members, including myself, have asked for information from both of these witnesses. These witnesses from time to time have agreed to supply us with information. Is it your intention to inform them as to what our usual return time is for the delivery? At the very end?
Yes, I'll do it, yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, gentlemen, a different topic. March the 20th, Minister for Public Services and Procurement Canada, Duclos, and President of the Treasury Board, Anon, addressed the Government Operations Committee, revealing that through a combination of tips and advanced data analytics, they had uncovered 3 subcontractors engaged in fraudulent billing across 36 government departments, amounting to nearly $5 million. They confirmed at committee, as they did at a national press conference, that all 3 subcontractors had been referred to the RCMP. The department officials then testified approximately 2 months thereafter, initially refused to provide the names of those subcontractors to committee. Only after we brought to their attention that parliamentary rules trump privacy, they actually revealed the identity of 3 individuals, not corporations, but individuals. Have those individuals, are they currently being investigated, or has the investigation been complete and charges laid?
So I am very much aware of the situation that you're describing. And I will go back to my previous statements that I will not be speaking to or confirming any active investigations into these specific incidents.
Is this an active investigation?
As I said, I will not be confirming that.
You won't confirm nor deny?
I will not confirm nor deny, but I go back to my earlier statements that the RCMP is involved in a broad number of investigations regarding procurement irregularities.
Okay. During that same period, both ministers outlined that this discovery, which traced back to almost 6 years, was merely the tip of the iceberg, suggesting a potential series of revelations to follow. The minister noted that 5 to 10, this was Duclos, 5 to 10 additional cases were currently under scrutiny. Subsequently, the Department of Public Services and Procurement Canada describes this as a first wave. They disclosed that another 5 to 10 cases were under examination. So, when Minister Duclos appeared at committee not too long ago, this was probably 2.5 months removed from his announcement of a potential second wave. I asked him specifically on 4 subsequent occasions, of those 5 to 10 companies currently under review for fraudulent billing, have any of those cases been referred to the RCMP? Wouldn't give me an answer. So, let's talk to the source. Has Minister Duclos or a member of his department, or Minister Anon or a member of her department, referred additional cases to the RCMP? I'm not asking you to opine on the nature of the investigation. I'm asking for a confirmation. Has a referral been made?
As I stated earlier, there are numerous investigations.
That's not good enough. Canadians need to know. There's no transparency or accountability with this Liberal government. I'm not asking you to jeopardize the nature of the investigation. I'm asking you to confirm. Has the Government of Canada made additional referrals? Yes or no?
You're asking me to answer a question in a manner that I cannot provide you the precision in which you're asking it. There are many ways that investigations come to us. I know that we are currently investigating several matters, as I stated
But why is
earlier.
it that you had no problem confirming that when the Auditor General referred a matter to you, you were investigating, but you can't confirm whether a minister or his department or her department made a referral? You can't opine on that. You see the disconnect there,
Actually,
Deputy?
Mr. Chair, I can give very accurate precision as to why that. I sat in a meeting personally with the Auditor General and the Commissioner where we had a discussion about the Auditor General referring information to us and offering her support in pursuit of a criminal investigation. What you're asking me for now, I have not personally been involved in those circumstances. I can say that organizationally there are circumstances that have led to us conducting numerous investigations into procurement irregularities. If I had had the opportunity to complete my answer in the question earlier as I attempted, I would have explained to you that I was lacking that precision because of a lack of my personal involvement or review of the
Confirm to
information.
committee, can you confirm to committee that either of those 2 ministers or members of their respective departments have made additional referrals with respect to fraudulent procurement billing? Can you confirm? Yes or no?
I do not have that information with me.
I understand, but will you supply that to the committee within so many days?
I can undertake to review the files
Thank
and
you.
determine if
Thank
we
you.
have that
Thank you.
information.
Thank you.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you so much.
Very much. And ending us out today, I believe it's Miss Bradford. Thank you, Miss
Thank
Bradford.
you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so just continuing along that, so Deputy Commissioner Flynn, the member opposite just mentioned that the Liberal government lacks transparency. Can you remind us whether or not the RCMP is overseen by the Liberal government?
The RCMP is not overseen by the Liberal government.
Right. Thanks for clarifying that. Now, you said earlier that you only speak about an ongoing investigation when there's significant public interest or public safety. What meets this threshold?
That's a difficult thing to answer. It really depends on the individual circumstances. It is usually in the situation where there is significant public safety risk. You'll hear it in sexual offenders, rather violent offenders that are in a particular area where we will make those announcements. You'll also hear it in where we do duty to warns, where there's threats to harm an individual or murder an individual. In those types of situations is where we will make public statements.
So would the ArriveCAN application meet that criteria?
I would say that it does not have that imminent harm element, but as you know, we have confirmed that we are investigating ArriveCAN, and that speaks to other analysis that we do with respect to the jeopardy that could cause, as well as the already existing public visibility of our efforts within that context.
Now, was the RCMP aware of the Auditor General's report before it was made public?
I was not aware of the details of the Auditor General report. I don't know if you were, Commissioner.
No, Mr. Chair, not of the details, but I was informed a couple days before that she would be tabling her report.
Did she approach you at all at any point? Or did you end up approaching her?
I believe it was the Auditor General that requested a meeting with me to talk about ongoing audits, but also to inform me of the tabling of the report.
And has the RCMP been given the same access to the same information that the AG used for her report on ArriveCAN?
I wouldn't be able to answer that, Chair. And again, I go back to what I referred to earlier. We want to make sure that every information that we do obtain is obtained in a legal fashion so that we can incorporate it into investigation. And if it leads to charges, it could be used in a judicial procedure.
What would the legal risk be if the RCMP, what would they be susceptible to for prejudicing an investigation on someone who turns out to be found innocent?
There are numerous things. There's civil liabilities. And depending on the circumstances that led to that scenario, there are additional penalties that or consequences that could arrive, neglect of duty, et cetera, if the conduct was so outrageous or egregious.
And can the RCMP compel information from the government or its agencies to aid investigations?
Again, it goes, Mr. Chair, to what I said earlier, providing we use the right format to obtain the information, being before the courts to have the government departments release the information. So again, so that the information could be used in a judicial proceeding.
Now, while the law applies to everyone equally, it may not be distributed evenly between the public and private sectors. Are you obliged to provide information to separate arms of Parliament, such as the AG, if the information and investigation you have conducted does not lead you to pursue criminal charges?
So we can be obliged based under their authorities and their audits, again, through various processes that are in place for exchange of information between organizations.
Do you believe that there is greater oversight over the public service rather than the private service, considering the level of scrutiny, oversight, and regulations that the public service employees are required to follow? How do you feel this impacts third-party contractors, such as GC Strategies, who work with the public service?
So, Mr. Chair, I am not aware of the oversight practices that exist in the private sector, nor am I aware of all the oversight practices that exist in the government departments. So I would not be at liberty to respond.
I don't think I have any further questions.
Okay. That is not a problem. Thank you, Commissioner Duhem and Mr. Flynn, Deputy Commissioner Flynn, for your testimony and participation in relation to the study of Report 1 ArriveCAN. Vous pouvez soumettre des informations supplémentaires à la greffier.
You can submit additional information by way of the clerk and also ask any questions you may have of the clerk.
Generally, and I don't think there'll be a problem with this because you've been very forthcoming today, as within the limitations you had outlined, we do like to have information from witnesses within about 3 weeks. If you hit an obstacle, just please let us know and we'll take that under consideration. But again, I want to thank you both for being here today and for being flexible with your schedule. I will excuse the witnesses. Gentlemen, you're free to go. I do have a little bit of just brief committee business, and I will just proceed to it because I don't want to keep members here for any longer than necessary. A reminder to all members that should you or your staff wish to consult the unredacted statement of work, to please email the committee inbox, that's the PAC, Parliamentary Public Accounts email, to schedule time with the clerk this week. Now, quickly before I leave, if there's discussion, I am happy to bring this back to us on Thursday. I don't think there'll be any concern on this because, well, let me go through it. Before we leave, I'd like to present Report 2 and 3 of the subcommittee. If you can put your earpieces in if you want to hear this. Votre sous-comité s'est réuni.
Your subcommittee met on the Tuesday, the 4th of June 2024, to discuss the committee's business and undertook to make the following recommendations. 1, that the committee dedicate 1 meeting to the ArriveCAN Report 2024 on the part of the Auditor General of Canada, and 1 meeting to consider the draft reports before the summer break. 2, that reports 5 through 7, 2024 of the Auditor General be referred to the committee on Tuesday, June 3rd, 2024, i.e. the upcoming reports being studied by the committee.
In this report. Now, obviously the first point is moot because a subsequent motion passed by this committee has changed this. So there's not going to be another ArriveCAN report before we rise. Could I look for agreement to concur this in? Yes, I'm seeing yes. I'm seeing no disagreement. Okay, that is concurred in. Again, if you put your pieces in.
Your subcommittee met yesterday, Monday, 17th of June 2024, to discuss the work of the committee and agree to make the following recommendations. 1, and only 1, that with respect to the committee's consideration of Report 6, Sustainable Development Technology Canada, 2024, reports 5 through 7 of the Auditor General of Canada, that each party send a prioritised list of witnesses to the clerk by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024. 3 p.m., not 5 p.m.
To have witnesses for that next report by September 3. Yes, Ms. Yep.
Okay. I have a question on the June 4th report. It says here that 1 meeting to the consideration of draft reports prior to the summer period. How will we fit that in?
You mean in the previous?
Yeah.
Well, as I said, that is moot. So I was Unless you would like me to squeeze it in, I was not planning on squeezing it in.
Well, I just thought on Thursday, if we're coming anyways, do the draft reports instead of the STDC reports.
Well, as I said, that is moot
Right.
because this committee passed a motion to have the witnesses in next Thursday. So that one's already been concurred in. Can I go back to this subcommittee from yesterday? Could I have this concurred in that witnesses will not come until the end of the summer? Yes.
I believe it's that we provide our list of witnesses.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, for the 3rd of September. So then meetings are
Yes.
afterwards.
Yes. Is that concurred in?
Yes.
Thank you. More to the conservative members. No, all of you, but so the committee's concurred in that as well. I will adjourn this meeting unless there's anything else. Meeting is adjourned. We'll see you Thursday.